Welcome back, guys. It's Colin with the Sun Pirates TCG back again with my co-host Mohammed,
What's up?
and we are back with another tier list for OP-11. So it's been about 3 or 4 weeks at this point since we made our week 1 tier list, and honestly, I don't think we were like super far off from where the meta is now, but there were some significant changes, and I thought we would do a little bit of self-deprecation and say where we were super off.
Never wrong, always right. Just in
Yeah.
the wrong direction.
So I'll put up on the screen real quick what our original one looked like for reference. So yeah, somewhere up here. And then going back to the tier list, our new one that I'm going to go over real quick. So the tiers we have are the same, so S, A, B, C. I named them a little bit different, but the spirit of it is still the same. S is going to be the best of the best. It's the most likely decks to top, as well as the highest representation within a top cut. A for awesome, these are the decks that are pretty likely to top, but not quite to the representation as in S tier. B for better than average, these are decks that can top once in a while. They're considered as like good decks, but not something that would be consistently topping in regionals and other big events. And then the C I kind of already filled out here. A lot of these are leaders we already went through before that we think like can be decent, but just have never topped or haven't really had little to no data within big tournaments, and probably are just really are just cut below SA and B tier.
We did preemptively fill it out to save a bit of time since a lot of them didn't really change. They're still like reasonable decks. They are cut above a lot of the other decks. Just with the cards that anything in the 3 tiers above them have, or like the way the meta is shaping out, they're just not the most well positioned decks.
Yeah, and there are a couple other decks I could have put in here in C tier, such as like Black Yellow Luffy, which actually did have a top in the Vegas regionals, I believe, and Nico Robin leader since it is a Gum Giant deck. But again, there's just so little data on these decks that they really should belong in C tier or below. And a couple of these are pretty much the same. I'm just going to go over C tier real quick, just a couple of these honorable mentions. Shanks, again, I still think it's an okay deck, but really it just has not been seeing play whatsoever as far as what we're seeing in top cuts. Marco and Katakuri, I believe, each respectively have one top within regionals the past few weeks, but no further than like a top 32. So they can be proven, but just, again, not nearly as consistently as the rest of the decks we're going to talk about. NL is kind of in the same boat as Shanks and Dofi as well, I would say. I think these decks are good. They just haven't had their time in the limelight the past few weeks.
Definitely.
And same with Nami.
And the right hands, Nami is definitely like a cut above these other decks, but it's like when it's not replicatable by like a wide audience, it's probably best to just leave it in C tier. It's not just a deck you could pick up and go with.
Yeah, and then the rest of these OP-11 decks at the bottom here, like Shirahoshi, Kobe, they can be better when there's some new cards coming out. Kobe has that promo coming up for him. Again, I don't think we really know when we're getting that one in English. And then Shirahoshi, I think OP-12 is when she gets a really, really good card. But otherwise, yeah. Just at the moment, not really too notable. Okay, and I think we can get started. Let's just get the elephants in the room out of the way, should we?
Arguably 3 elephants, not 2 elephants now.
Yeah.
Blue purple UP and green purple GP have proven that they are very top contenders. They take up a large share of top cuts. They make it past just like top 32 up to like top 16, top 8, top 4 even. I will say blue purple has rarely won top cut, but it looks to be the most consistent Swiss deck.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it might be the best deck for Swiss, but not the best deck for a top cut, perhaps.
The deck is very inherently powerful, and when it does, it just like, in exchange for having a weaker early game, it just has like the best late game.
Yeah.
Of honestly, probably any One Piece deck in the history of the game. Probably not better than full power Black Yellow Luffy, but It's just
I
like
think it's like
so strong in what it does. And does it so
I think it's like a
consistently.
similar role to Whitebeard back in the day, where like it has like almost a representation that Whitebeard did, and it has the power level that Whitebeard did. But then just in top cuts, sometimes it just gets beaten out, or kind of like Sakatsuki too, I guess.
Right.
When you get to a top cut situation, sometimes it just gets beaten out by other specific decks that are more targeted against it, like Red Green Law back in the day, Purple Luffy back in the day, things like that.
Definitely.
And then, honestly, Belo Betty's like still a hard one for me personally to rank. So
Based on
in my
results, I
head,
would put Betty in S tier, honestly.
I think so. If we're going based on results, I agree. Like literally that most recent regional.
It's honestly like the most recent few
Yeah.
regionals. So like Betty
The
has
Toronto
proved that
regional
while it's
top
not,
three.
Betty's like the opposite of blue purple, where it is not the best deck in Swiss, but when it gets to top cut, it is one of the best top cut decks, because these decks that are very consistent in Swiss, like green purple Luffy, like blue purple Luffy, Betty has a very favorable matchup into it. So in a best of three in a top cut situation where you're playing against decks that you're very favored into, Betty actually has been overperforming, which is very interesting
Yeah.
to see.
Again, it's one of those things where the power level of the deck doesn't quite line up to most of these other leaders, but it's just because these other two Luffy leaders are so heavily represented, they're so format warping, and if she just eats both of these decks for breakfast, I think
Honestly,
I
it can
think
be
she
like
deserves to
put
be
there
there.
with an asterisk. Like
Yeah.
it's only an S tier deck in a top cut situation. Honestly, outside of top cut, it's probably still A tier. Honestly, maybe even like mid to low A tier.
Yeah.
It's just the
Like,
fact that, like we said, when the decks are very consistent in Swiss, which are blue purple Luffy and green purple Luffy, are getting into top cut. If a Betty does manage to make it through Swiss and into top cut, it just has a very favorable field.
yeah. And so speaking of decks that are not one of the Luffy leaders but cook Betty, is Buggy here. So where would you put this one now, Mohammed? I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Personally, I want to put it in a very low A or a very high B. It's not performing as well as we expected it to, but
Yeah.
it's not necessarily very unfavored into what's good. It is very favored into Belo Betty, Shoe Buggy locking out their Karasu from shrinking you, their Ivankovs from swinging, their Inazumas from swinging, so they don't have like a haste attacker. Is very strong. It's just in the long run, it gets outvalued by blue purple, and in the early game, it doesn't keep up with green purple. So
Yeah.
it's like it's a very tough call to make. So looking at the most recent events, it did take a number of the top 32 slots. I do not believe it made it past top 8 in any of them,
Yeah.
but it did.
But I think
it
making
did
it to
kept
top
it
cut
did
consistently.
keep making it into top 32. It's made it into top 32 very
Yeah.
consistently in the last 9 regionals that have happened at the time of recording, end of June.
Yeah.
So
I I think for that reason, I think he still deserves to be an A, but he's definitely not as strong as I was originally
yeah,
expecting him to be.
I definitely
from our
have to
first
agree.
list.
I was very hyped for the deck. Maybe it's just the build needs to be figured out still, but as of time of recording, I would put him in like a solid mid to low A tier. Just he's very favored into some decks and unfavored into others, and there's not really much in the way of like teching you can do to alleviate that issue.
And for another deck that we may have overestimated a little bit is Black Purple Luffy, the Peanut Butter Luffy. So at the beginning of the format, right after we made our tier list, this was considered to be one of the best decks. It did really well in the Florida regional that happened at the beginning of the format, and then from then on it kind of petered off. I don't know if that's maybe a combination of like other deck builds kind of adjusting for it, as well as just the way people play the matchup probably put it down a couple notches. But what do you think?
So again, looking at the data, it looks like half of the time after the Florida regional it did top, and half of the time it didn't. It never came close to the performance it did have in the Florida Oviedo Regional, where it was a large chunk of the top cut. And I think that's a lot of the surprise factor that came into it. People very heavily underestimated the deck and didn't prepare for it. And because of that, it was like very easy for the deck to run the tables. Afterwards, I think a lot of the green-purple Luffys went back to playing Gamma Knife. A lot of the blue-purple Luffys cut the Gravity Blades to play extra copies of Red Rock. Because if you can just answer the Star Deck Luffy, or colloquially Beer Luffy, the deck just kind of falls a little flat. Like, the Star Deck Luffy is what enabled it to like be so strong and so prevalent, because you become a 7k and invalidate a lot of swings. But if the card gets answered, you're in a very bad spot, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, another adaptation I've seen from Blue Purple was 9-drop Mihawk.
Yeah, definitely.
Which, that's like extra good against Black Purple, just removing their best body and having a 9k to contest future bodies.
And that card was also good into Green Purple, since it answers Sanji Pudding, if with one stage. Like, they have to play 2 stages to protect it at that point. Right, which throws them off tempo sometimes. And even we've been seeing in the East, they have adapted to playing 1 or 2 Mihawks for the same reason, just to answer Black Purple.
Yeah.
So
ultimately,
it's a good deck.
I still think
I
still think he's in the same boat as Buggy. Is like low A.
I'd put it below
perhaps.
Buggy, honestly. Buggy's been topping more consistently. Moving on, we do have Red Green Smoker, which I feel like we are repeating this a lot, but we probably underestimated this leader a lot.
Yeah, so for reference, last tier list I had this in the middle of the pack in C tier, but honestly, now Red Green Smoker hasn't seen very many top cut finishes over the past few regionals. Now Toronto most recently, it is there in the pie chart, but moreover, on the sim power rankings, as you can find on Eggman's website or his videos, it's pretty highly rated, honestly. I'm just looking right here. It's number 4 highest rated, 52% win rate.
Yeah, the deck's been doing a lot better in Europe. Funny enough, it has put up results in both, I'm gonna mispronounce this, I'm so sorry, both Toulouse and the Amsterdam regionals. As well as the Dublin regional. So it might just be a North America thing where it's not really being played, but like Colin was saying, it has a very high rating in the Eggman power ratings, as well as it just has a really good matchup spread when you look at the data. It's only really unfavored into the 2 main aggro decks of the format, which are Belo Betty and Zoro. But against everything else, it's very favored. Like Blue Purple, it's only slightly, it's 2%, but everything else is 5+% favored. So
yeah, I mean, turns out A-Drop Captain Kid and Mulgun are pretty good cards against Green Purple still. And Green Purple's a very popular card. Mulgun's a very good card against Black Purple Luffy's.
I mean, Mulgun's still
monsters.
Good versus Blue Purple. If you bait their blocker, or if they turn their bodies sideways too early, it's very easy to swing into a 4k body, just using it as a shrink.
And as opposed to another red deck like Shanks, your Mulgun only costs 2 Dawn effectively, so it's just way more efficient.
Sometimes even 1 Dawn if you have the Smoker in play.
Yeah.
It's 1 mana -4. It's you Otama twice for 1 card. I mean, in terms of total finishes, it's seen more total finishes than Black Purple Luffy. It just hasn't placed as high as far as I'm aware. I would probably put it either very high B or very low A, personally.
Honestly, this could also just be a symptom of the format developing as well, that it's more recent. Smoker's been doing better and better. I can maybe agree with low A on this. Honestly, I'm this close to even putting it higher than
I'd probably put it above
Black Purple and Buggy.
I'd probably put it below Buggy, but above Black Purple. I think Buggy has
somewhere in the middle here.
I think based on the total number of results, Buggy's probably just slightly edges it out a little bit.
Yeah. So here's kind of going back to Buggy. Here's kind of where I see Buggy. He's kind of like the gatekeeper deck of the format. He's not the best deck, but he's the kind of deck that sets the bar for everyone else. Kind of like Katakuri in set 6 when, like Sakazuki and Moria were obviously the best decks.
Right.
All right, moving on. This is a fan favorite and
near and dear
honestly,
to Trevor's heart.
Near and dear to Trevor's heart, and honestly, I want to put this guy pretty high now. Edward freaking Newgate. So last time I had him in C tier as well, but I don't know anymore. Now, granted, this leader has been topping, but it's all by one guy. So
shout out to JCM.
Shout out to JCM.
The one and only, my goat. I probably would put the leader in B tier. Honestly, I'd just make a tier called JCM, but that's a dead horse to beat. The deck does have a lot of potential, and if you're very good at combat math, this is likely a deck for you to play. It's a deck where if you are very good at like fundamentals, you can like very easily diff someone. Like you could do much better than they can. Just based on that. It's a very good fundamentals testing deck. And if you're better at fundamentals than your opponent, you can get away with a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I know JCM himself admitted that, he got some very lucky breaks throughout his tournaments that he topped with this leader. But honestly, I still feel like there's some legs to this. Like, it's like you can only get lucky so many times, right? I feel like. So I think there really is something to this deck. And I tried it out myself before at a couple locals, and honestly, it felt pretty good. For what it's worth.
Just pray to not get pudding.
Right.
That's the...
Yeah.
You just
but,
can't
like,
beat
again,
it.
Yeah, but again, like, Buggy is, like, a little bit down on his luck. Or if you just dodge the pudding, then,
Same thing with blue-purple. If they just, like, can't find it and draw it, then you're golden. But if they can find it, you're in a bit of trouble.
Yeah, but I think B is fair. Again, the high conversion rate by just being one single person that's topping with it is also... maybe a symptom of the fact that not that many people are playing it in the first place, and the one guy that out of the field that is playing it is like arguably, maybe not even arguably, he's just the best possible Whitebeard pilot. So
definitely,
All right, moving on, we got Bonney. This deck is honestly significantly better than I was giving credit for. I
will give credit
moral
where
of the
credit's
story.
due. I severely underestimated the potential of this deck. A lot of it comes down to I don't really enjoy the way the deck plays, but Bonney is very powerful, and the stuff in the starter deck helps it, and it's not even the searcher that really helps it, but like the 2Ks. They just like let you save so many slots and just play so much more consistently. Yeah,
it's like the deck's honestly like less bricky now than I was originally giving it credit for, and with that, this leader has honestly won quite a few serials. Like, not just tops, but, like, serials. There were 3 in the top 8 of Vegas, I believe.
Yes, there were 3 in top 8. All 3 of them were, like, very close to the same list.
And I'm looking at the Sang Sang... I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. The Mexico regionals. And there's also, like, a couple Bonnies in top 8. So, again, this leader is getting multiple serials throughout the past few weeks, which I think definitely says something there. So, I think I would put it pretty high up in A.
I would probably put it at the top of A, honestly. It's just...
Yeah.
It's a very consistent leader. A lot of the issues it had before have been, like, solved, where it's just, like, very well positioned with what it tries to do. Like, using the Bonney leader, when blue-purple tries to, like, play safe and, like, not swing out their board, like, if they try to poke you, you still rest one of their bodies, and then that body dies to Shanks, and now you have an 11k. And you still have a Dawn left for your leader for the next turn, and then you pass. You have access to Hody Jones to rest 2 Dawn, or rest their Dawn and their blocker. Same thing versus green-purple. You can rest their Dawn, or rest their blockers, or whatever combination. Versus Belo Betty, you get to cut the number of attacks they have in half, and also start stunning them with Carrot. You have Tashigi for protection against the black decks. You have Captain Kid to become an 8k base in the late game. It does, like, everything well.
According to the data, she's not super favorable versus blue-purple, but she can put up a pretty decent fight, honestly. And then these other 2 leaders, Betty and green-purple, she cooks them, like pretty handily. So the data shows, like, she's definitely, like, putting up results, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then moving on, we have CP0 Lucci. So I think this one's kind of hard to rate. I still think he's really good. Now, how good he actually is, I might have overrated him a little bit in our previous tier list. I put him at the very top of A tier during a previous tier list. I think he should be a little bit lower.
I would probably put him at the top of B tier. I genuinely think that we should have swapped Bonney and Lucci looking at like results and data. Like, I think Lucci is a good deck. I just think that the issue is a difference in playstyle of East versus West. And I've had this discussion a lot with my fellow Sun Pirates, but Lucci is a deck that needs to like stabilize to be able to do well in a meta, especially with current builds to deal with blue-purple playing 3 or 4 10-drop Kuzans. Shout out to my boy C, who did do well with the deck in one of the recent regionals. I believe it was in the Vegas regional. I believe he got top 32.
So, but that's the point I was about to make, though, is that Lucci does top here and there, but again, his tops aren't very high. Like, they don't go that far. They're mostly top 32s. You know?
There was
I
a
think
top
there might be
32
one or
and
two
a
serials,
top 16 in Vegas.
Yeah.
And then I believe it also topped again. It did top in Toronto and the Mexico regional. But
again, like the large majority of his tops are just 32s and doesn't really get much farther than that, you know?
yeah, it does struggle against Buggy since Shoe Buggy.
Buggy's so bad for Lucci.
So funny enough, you'd think that the issue lies in them gaining protection with Krakow, which is a downside for him. But honestly, the bigger hit is Shoe Buggy, because
turning off Kuzan and Brook, right?
Exactly, because it stops 3s and 4s from attacking. They cannot swing with a Brook to shrink and KO something, and they cannot swing with a Kuzan to shrink something.
Yeah.
So some of their like key ways of like shrinking and dealing with your bodies just get turned off. It's like if they go Shoe Buggy, play 6-cost Mihawk, they have a 7-cost and a 6-cost, and you cannot use Kuzan, you cannot use Brook, you don't have Ice Age because it's banned, and you're on 6-don. And it's like...
Yeah. Again, it's just one of those things where I'm pretty sure I said in the previous video as well that Lucci had a good fighting chance against Buggy. I'm very wrong. Like, I was just hard wrong about that. I will fully admit that, guys. Like
there's a chance against Krakow, since Krakow only protects once per turn. If you like shrink something, you can like try to kill with like a Lucci and then swing with the Brook to like actually finish it off. But if Shoe Buggy's on the table, it's just you just can't.
Yeah, if it's like Shoe Buggy plus Krakow or double Krakow, it's like you're cooked, bro. I think.
It's just like you just don't have enough resources to answer it, especially like if they establish the Shoe Buggy and you don't have like an immediate answer, like Laboon plus something, like you have a Laboon on the table and then you like cast like 2 Brooks or something to shrink it and then shrink it and KO it. It's just they establish a Krakow after and the game's over. You just like cannot deal with that board.
I would agree with High B. I think I would put him above Whitebeard.
I agree.
To give credit where credit's still due, he's still really strong against Green Purple Luffy and still really strong against Betty. So
definitely, he is one of Betty's worst matchups just because he can establish removal very easily into the low costed body deck. Yeah, and he's a 5 health leader, so it's like even that much harder to like try and burst him down.
Yeah. All right, now moving on to my personal favorite, Reiju. So shout outs to the homie Karar. He went the distance where I could not. I think, although Reiju still only has the one top, and that's by Karar, I believe, since the Orlando regional.
I believe that's correct.
So, I might be biased. I still put Reiju somewhere in B. I think maybe below Whitebeard, just by sheer number of tops. I still think Reiju's better than the rest of these decks in C tier. Again, I might be biased, but she has like some really good tools going on for her. So I said before that she might have a hard time against Black Purple Luffy, and actually, honestly, that's not true. As I talked to Karar and kind of watched the deck in action, she actually has a pretty solid matchup into Black Purple. Against the top 2 Purple Luffy decks, I still think the tools that you need to beat those matchups are the non-searchable cards. Like, for example, blue purple, I feel like you really need Black Maria to put up a fight. And then against green purple, I think you really need Porsche to put up a good fight, because you need to like Don minus far enough to enable your stuff. But otherwise, like, again, she has tools against most of the format, but just not quite.
I know.
I don't know if it's between representation or just the sheer power of the deck. It's just not quite enough compared to everyone else here, if that makes sense.
I think as a leader that has put up a result, it's fine to put it in B tier. I'd probably leave it at the low end of B tier. Like, the deck is very powerful in what it does, but again, just based on results, it might be the number of people playing it also. There's always a bias when it comes to these type of events. It's like mathematically, if half of an event is composed of one deck, that deck will 100% of the time make it to top cut, no questions asked, just by sheer mathematics.
Yeah, I think there's like some really good analogies from like other video games, like Marvel Rivals, for example. Like, Reiju is a deck that you can get value out of, but I think you need to put more into the deck than other leaders up here.
Exactly. It's like
to actually get the same result.
That's a very good way of putting it. Just, can you achieve a similar result for less effort with another leader? Yes. Do you want to do that if your name is Colin Wong? The answer is no.
I don't know, you might catch me with Reiju at Gen Con. We'll see. Alright, so let's go to Purple Luffy next. I think this is another one I probably overrated in the previous tier list. Now, for reference, I put this one
in A tier.
Or we put this one in A tier. Pretty high in A tier, honestly.
I think it's about right, honestly.
You think so?
So, in more recent events, it has been putting up a lot more events, or a lot more results. It has put up results in Amsterdam. It's put up results again in Toulouse. It put up results in Toronto. I think it's kind of a region bias. It's putting up a lot of results outside of the United States. It's putting up results in Canada. It's putting up results in Europe. It's just not putting up results in our area. Like, the deck is strong in what it does. The power ranking does put it in 5th place, just below Red Green Smoker, but with a higher win rate percentage. I will say that the disparity between 1st and 2nd for the deck is really bad. Yeah, a lot of the matchups,
it's the same as before, right?
Yeah, a lot of the matchups come out to like about 50-50. But if you split it between like 1st and 2nd, it's like 70-30, 60-40. It's like it's just like, it's like a massive gap between going 1st and going 2nd. But like, when you average them, it's like about 50%, because you'll win your dice roll half the time.
So, in other words, if you're taking this to a tournament, make sure you bring some weighted dice. I'm kidding, Bandai. I'm kidding. Don't ban me. But yeah.
no weighted dice here, please.
Yeah.
I already lose enough dice rolls as it is, man.
I can agree with somewhere in A tier. It does get tops. It actually has been getting cereals specifically. So
I would probably put it.
What do you think? Maybe smack dab in the middle.
Yeah, I'd put it in the middle. I was gonna say either above or below Smoker, but I think it is more consistent than Smoker, and it has access to the Forsaken G3 3G
Gum Gum Giant. Hey, yeah, it can't be that bad. It plays Gum Gum Giant.
Yeah, as a deck
and
that has access to that. So. Yeah, it has Katakuri and Gum Gum Giant.
So yeah, it can't be all that bad. All right, going on to another fan favorite and eternally good red deck, Zoro. This one, where do we put Zoro? Last time I put him in A tier, I believe. Yeah, I did. So he does get some amount of tops from what I'm looking at as far as the past few regionals. Well, I say some, but I think I only see one, actually.
I was going to say, statistically, he hasn't actually been performing very well. Mathematically on the sim, he has a very high win percentage.
It's like above 50%.
It is. It's like 53.5 is technically the second highest win percentage on the sim, right behind Belo Betty is 55.5%. And its unfavored matchups are not ones you see as often. It is very bad, very, very bad into Buggy, pretty bad into Bonney, and then slightly bad into Blue Purple. But it's pretty much more than 5 to 10% favored into every other matchup. which is very surprising. Not very surprising, but it's like surprising how few tops it has for those statistics. And again, take some data with a grain of salt. The deck is very strong in what it does. It floods the board very quickly, very early. It is very low to the ground, which is why like God Threat is especially potent against it from the blue purple side. And that's kind of curve dependent on if you go first or second. I'm definitely sure that going first into blue purple, you're probably much more favored than going second. But I don't know. It's probably high B, just based on its matchup spread. But it doesn't have the results behind it for me to call it an A tier deck, I'd have to say.
Yeah, I think he deserves somewhere in B, maybe below, between Lucci and Whitebeard.
I think so too.
I suppose, yeah. I think the issue with him, as opposed to Belo Betty, is that he's just ever so slightly, like, 1 to half a turn slower than Belo Betty for getting to the kill turn, which I think that's all the difference against these two Luffy decks.
I think the biggest thing is that Betty has a favored blue-purple matchup, and while she does have a much more unfavored matchup into Teach and Zoro itself, Zoro has a slightly unfavored matchup into blue-purple just because it takes him a little longer to start hitting into that 3 life versus Betty that can hit it from turn 2, just like start smacking it. Which, like, that difference, like, even though Zoro has a better matchup spread, Zoro has less losing matchups than Betty does. Just the fact that Betty is, like, that 1 turn faster versus blue-purple, like, pushes it over the edge as the premier aggro deck.
Yeah. All right, moving on, we got Blackbeard.
Good old Blackbeard, Marshall D. Teach. Originally, we did put Teach in mid to low A tier, and based on results, he probably deserves to be a little bit higher. I'd probably still put him in A tier, but
I think the opposite. Maybe I'm biased. I don't like Teach at all.
He's been putting up a lot of results. He's been very consistently topping the events.
Yeah, the numbers don't lie. That is true.
Honestly, he could probably stay in the same spot. As far as I'm aware, he hasn't been making it into top 8. I'm not really going to go through all of the regionals right now to check.
It's just green-purple's so scary for him. It's like super scary. And blue-purple's also like potentially scary if they see like their gravity blades and, you know, as Teach, if you can't get your setup going, like your double Van Augur plus 7 drop safely enough, then they might just blue-purple's just going to run away with the game by just drawing 2 cards per turn.
Like, funny enough, Teach has like a lot of unfavored matchups, but a lot of them aren't like very heavily unfavored. The only like really bad matchups he has are Zoro and green-purple.
Yeah.
But it's like when you're going into a field expecting green-purple and blue-purple, and while you're like only slightly unfavored into blue-purple by roughly, at least, again, this is all some data, so take it with a grain of salt. When you're roughly like 2 to 3% unfavored into blue-purple, but you're like 10% unfavored into green-purple and 20% unfavored into Zoro, it's like, do you really feel that confident in it? I don't know.
Yeah, again, I said this to other friends before, but like a 10% slant in Sim is like, I think in real life that's like a GG. It's like that's cooked, bro. Obviously, you know,
it's game over, man.
Obviously, I'm not saying it's like completely unwinnable. Yeah, I'm sure people have won the losing matchup before, but it's just so hard, man.
Definitely. I would still put him in A tier again. Like, he has a positive win rate on the Sim, and he's been putting up results in a number of these regionals. I'd
still put him like pretty low on there, maybe like neighbors to black purple.
Yeah,
Luffy.
I'd put it on one side or the other. He's still a good deck. I personally wouldn't take it, and also
me neither.
It's a very real thing that you'll hear some of the top players talk about, which is like tournament fatigue. I've gone on links discussing with Jonas about it, how he plays 4 tournaments worth of games during every regional he plays because it just like builds up that stamina to not burn out. And Teach is definitely one of those decks where you have to track your deck because you need to know where your important cards are every time you search, because with your stage you're always going to get back around to it, and that builds up a lot of fatigue in a game very, very quickly. You'll get very mentally exhausted. So I just don't like those type of decks in very, very long games.
Yeah.
It's a lot worse. I know there's a similar thing for green purple because green purple does just as much, if not more, searching than Teach.
Most of teacher searches are like 3 cards at a time, like between stage and my era, right? Whereas like most of green purple searches are like Nami and Zoro Juro, which is like top fives, which this is gonna sound really stupid, but it's like a lot easier to search top fives than it is top threes, I suppose.
Like mathematically. But like that legitimately it's a thing. Like in Teach you need to track like, okay, I've now put these 2 cards at the bottom of my deck. Like I just bottom decked 10 drop and 5 cost Kuzan. Alright, now I just decked 2 cards I don't care about. So now those 2 cards are like 2 cards up, and then like another like stage search put another 5 cost Kuzan down there. So now you need to remember like your top 2, your like 5th from the top, and it's just like so much more versus knowing like like these 4 cards at the bottom of my deck are like giant 2k. So when I wrap around back to this 4 stack, my giant will draw these 2Ks when I use it.
Right.
But
all right, and moving on, we have another starter deck leader, Yamato. This one's a fan favorite, and honestly, I think Yamato's better than I was originally giving it credit for. I originally put this one in B, like middle of the pack in B, but now after seeing results with Yamato, you think it's fair to put them in low A? This deck's pretty good.
I think I would
honestly.
still put it in high B. So it looks like
High B?
it does well in Swiss, but it does not look to be very strong in top cut situations. I do see that it has topped both of the 2 most recent tournaments, the Toulouse and the Toronto regionals, but I don't believe it topped any of the other regionals this season. Oh, it did top Vegas, but none of the tops went past top 16. All 2 of them ended in top 16 and one of them ended in top 8, just because the strategy is like so reliant on being aggressive and being fast, whereas sometimes like in a best of 3 situation you can just like sputter out and fall flat just when your opponent does have the ability to get the variance out for like they can leave variance
the player
for
to
one game.
adjust to. I think also when you're in a best of 3, like the opponent has like room to make adjustments. Like they know what they figure out the build you're playing. You know, they have a better
it's
game to
also
play
like
around.
if you haven't had a lot of practice versus Yamato, like a 1 game situation can be very, very scary. But like when you're in a best of 3, it's very easy to like take game 1 as a learning experience and then use that knowledge to improve and then win out games 2 and 3.
Yeah.
So for that reason, I'd probably leave it in high B. It is a very strong Swiss deck. If we were rating it as just a Swiss deck, I would probably put it in low to mid A. But when you're factoring in everything, I'd probably just put it in high B.
Yeah. I can agree with that. It's still a really good deck. I would not blame anyone for bringing this.
Oh, 100%. I've considered it.
Tournament.
If it's a Swiss only event, I'll jam some games. I'll go face.
Yeah, if I'm in like a 512 man or smaller, it's like a 9-rounder with no top cut. It's like, heck yeah, I'm bringing Yamato. This deck is sweet.
Gen Con maybe.
Yeah,
Have
honestly,
a
Gen
little
Con maybe.
tee fun at Gen Con before Nationals. Get out of my system.
All right, next up we have Green Yellow Law. I really been talking this one up in our last tier list video, and it sort of delivered. It has like I believe a couple of tops here and there. It topped, from the looks of it, the Las Vegas regionals.
It topped Vegas. It topped Toronto.
I see it in Dublin.
Yeah,
as well.
I actually did like fairly reasonably in Dublin, taking a number of top cut spots. Both of them from Dublin ended in top 16, and then Toronto was another top 16 finish and a top 32 finish.
Yeah, I feel like this is definitely a deck where like red green law walked so that this green yellow law could run kind of deal. It's a really good deck. Someone described it to me pretty well, where it's one of those decks that it almost feels like you can play through any situation if you know the line. It has a really flexible game plan. It just seems so good on paper.
So I'll quote Jeremy Jellybeans from Twitter, because this is a deck very near and dear to him, and he has a lot of experience on it, and it's a deck he likes to play a lot. And he says, It is one of the most math complicated decks in the game, and if you're willing to put in the time to do all the math and do all the learning and do all those calculations, the deck ends up with a 52% win rate across the board, which a 52% win rate across the board is very, very good.
That's really good.
However, you can achieve a very similar goal playing blue-purple without having to do all the math, and these words come straight from him. So for the general audience, any of the other top decks are things that you should go for. If you really want to do the math, calculate all your searches, find like insane lethal lines because of Cavendish and Restand Law, Stunning Dawn with Bonney, stuff like that, then by all means, this deck is phenomenal. It's just a lot of work. I'd probably put it in B tier personally. It will put up results. It's very similar to Mono Blue Nami and, like we were saying, the JCM Whitebeard. It's going to be specific people doing it. I don't think it's going to have like a general meta performance. You're just going to see very familiar names doing it repeatedly.
Yeah, I think if you're him, you could probably put Law up here, but I think for the general populace,
if you are
maybe like
Trafalgar D. Water Law himself, then deck is S tier. But if you are not, deck's like probably B or C tier.
Yeah, again, I think it's like the Marvel Rivals analogy all over again, or what I said with Reiju earlier. It's like, I think you put it best. The amount of effort that you put into it, you can get some really good results out of it. The deck is capable of it, but you can get very similar results with like these top leaders for less effort.
Definitely. Yeah. It's just one of those decks where like your effort will be rewarded, but you could have like invested that effort anywhere else to be rewarded sooner. Like, is it possible to perform with it? Yes. But can you perform with any other deck putting in less effort? Also, yes. Moving on, we'll look at the final leader of the tier list, which is Blue Yellow Nami. We originally rated the leader in A tier, and based on results,
has she even topped?
I don't think so. Let me look. Give me 1 second.
I said this leader was really good, and I'm a little bit.
So
I'm a little bit embarrassed to say I don't think she does.
In our defense, we based a lot of our opinion on the results from Japan, thinking the starter deck Kozuki Oden pictured above was not the end-all be-all the deck needed.
Maybe it is at this point.
We are definitely incorrect. Based on what I'm seeing of compiled tournament data, it has not performed without it.
I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it in any bar charts.
As a preface, we do get that starter deck before Nationals. So Nami will probably be a higher rating before then. We do not have it, however, before the next Florida Regional in Kissimmee or Gen Con. And for that reason, in the current tier list, I would probably put Nami in either high C or low B.
I can't even put her in B. Like the rest of these leaders actually like made it to they made it onto the pie chart. She hasn't.
Some of the stuff in C tier has made it onto the pie chart.
Yeah. Like I'll put her above Shanks. How about that?
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Shanks doesn't have results. He can stay down. Sorry, Shanks fans. He's still not performing. I cannot defend him for you. You have to defend him in the comments.
Again, on paper, this leader's just so good. She's really fun to play, too. It's such a cool deck. But...
the deck is very fun, and honestly, it's like very scary to play against it sometimes, just because of like the power of what it can do and becoming a 7k base, discarding like a useless counter. It's kind of like a soft version of Black Yellow Luffy, but I don't know. It's in the colors where it doesn't benefit from that as well as like Black Yellow Luffy did.
No, I totally agree. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the tier list, guys. I think everything's about right where it should be. We definitely had a few shifts, like I said before. Honestly, Buggy's still, now that I look at it, Buggy's still pretty high up here.
I mean, for a deck that like has topped every event, I don't think there's an event that Buggy hasn't. There might be like one or two.
But yeah, we've definitely had some significant differences. Like, obviously, of course, Bonney's up here, Smoker's up here. Yamato and Whitebeard a little bit higher than they were before.
Betty much higher.
But most things are still intact. Now, I guess a few closing thoughts on this. And you can tell from the way I named the tiers too, it's really not as close to a tier 0 meta as I originally thought it was going to be. Like, originally we were saying, like, oh man, Snake Man is just so format warping. Everything is rated based around Snake Man, which it's still kind of true to an extent. Yeah, it's still an extremely good deck, and a lot of these ratings, like Belo Betty especially, have ratings that are heavily influenced by Snake Man being here. But as far as representation goes, it's not quite to the extent of, like, you know, like Whitebeard having, you know, like 3/4 of the pie.
Way back when in the days chart. Of OP3, OP2, OP3.
Should Gum Giant be banned still? Probably.
No.
Probably something should be hit. That's a whole nother can of worms. But again,
next
these
podcast,
two decks,
maybe.
These two decks, very, very powerful still. Betty, still an excellent deck. I would definitely try to maintain a game plan for this if you're going to a large event such as Gen Con coming in a month. And honestly, but the rest of the format feels, I think, more open than I was originally giving it credit for. Like, we have a solid number, like 6 leaders right here that we have in A tier that I think are pretty good picks for a tournament. And honestly, even in B tier, I would not blame anybody for taking any of these 6 leaders in B tier.
Anything in, like, the first, arguably, like, the first 3 of C tier and above, I would not be surprised to see you in a regional or in, like, a major tournament. Like, yeah. I would be, like, I would be surprised by a lot of the other ones in C tier if it was, like, later rounds of an event. But I like calling can't fault anyone for taking anything B tier or above to an event, which is usually very good for a meta. Like, 15 viable decks. Like, not all of them are, like, top rung, but 15 viable decks is a lot.
Yeah, and even, like, a lot of these decks in C tier is, like, would I recommend bringing these to a big regionals? Probably not, but, like, for example, if you're, I believe his tag is Unlikely Hero, the guy that won Pasadena twice with Nami. If you're that guy for Nami or someone of similar, you know, experience and skill, I can't blame you for that. Usopp too is just, like, it's not a bad deck. Like, none of these decks are bad decks. That's, like, the core point I'm trying to get at here. So yeah, I'm really not here to yuck anyone's yum. Like, these are solid decks. Even other decks, maybe even like Red Yellow Sabo, Black Yellow Luffy, you can get value. Again, it's just back to that core argument of, like, you can get good value out of those decks, but it's just going to be harder than these decks up here, right?
Definitely.
But yeah, guys, that's the tier list. And for those of you that skipped to the end just to see what we have, here it is. So you can compare and contrast. I would like for you to, you know, give us at least a little bit more watch time, but, you know, I can't really control that. So, but for those of you that have actually watched it through, thank you so much for watching, as always. And even for those of you that skipped to the end, thank you for clicking on the video in the first place. It really does help us out. We made it to 500 subscribers, which is pretty awesome milestone for us. So thank you everyone that subbed either from our previous tier list or from that Robin video or even our Gundam stuff. Don't worry, we'll still be doing more One Piece content as well as Gundam in the very near future. And yeah, remember to like and subscribe as always if you're new here, and we will see you in the next one.
See ya.